Fleet Admiral Kextar of the Hegemony stared at the tactical display showing 9,900 warships in perfect formation. Each vessel bristled with weapons capable of turning continents to glass. It was the largest invasion force in galactic history, all aimed at a small blue planet, whose inhabitants had barely learned to leave their own atmosphere. Fleet Admiral, his aide Sub-Commander Velnara reported, her voice tight with confusion. I must question the wisdom of this deployment. Our target is a pre-FTL civilization that still uses chemical rockets. Kextar's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The High Command's orders are clear. Earth is to be conquered with overwhelming force. No exceptions, no quarter given. What neither of them knew was that their conversation was being monitored by a network of sensors that stretched across 3 star systems. On Earth, in a facility buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains, Director Sarah Chen watched the approaching fleet with grim determination. How long until they reach orbit? She asked her team. 18 hours, replied Dr. Marcus Webb, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. All defense protocols are active and standing by. Sarah nodded. Humanity had been preparing for this moment for longer than most people realized. The approaching hegemony fleet thought they were attacking a primitive world. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The hegemony's advanced scouts entered Earth's solar system, expecting to find primitive satellites and maybe a few space stations. Instead, their sensors immediately detected something impossible. Fleet Admiral, Communications Officer Rixal, shouted, his voice cracking with panic. The humans, they're speaking our language. They're hailing us on military frequencies that shouldn't exist in their technology base. Kextar felt his blood chill. Put it through. A human voice filled the bridge, speaking perfect hegemony standard with an accent that somehow conveyed both politeness and menace. Hegemony Fleet, this is Admiral Rebecca Martinez of Earth Defense Command. You are ordered to halt your advance immediately and explain your presence in our system. The bridge fell silent. How could these primitives know their language? How did they even know the fleet was there through their stealth systems? Impossible, whispered Intelligence Officer Zalek. Our cloaking technology is beyond their comprehension. Kextar composed himself and opened a channel. This is Fleet Admiral Kextar of the Hegemony 4th Conquest Fleet. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our empire. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift. The human's response came immediately. Admiral, I'm afraid you've made a serious miscalculation. Earth is not as defenseless as your intelligence suggests. This is your only warning to withdraw. Before Kextar could respond, every alarm on his ship began screaming. Fleet Admiral, Scanner Technician Morvek cried out. Energy readings are spiking from the planet's surface, massive electromagnetic signatures across all inhabited continents. On the main display, Earth transformed before their eyes. What had appeared to be a peaceful blue marble now showed geometric patterns of light spreading across its surface. Cities, military bases, even remote locations began to pulse with energy signatures that defied classification. Sir, Velnara reported, her voice barely steady, the first wave is reporting navigation failures. Their guidance systems are being rewritten from the outside. Kextar watched in horror as 200 of his most advanced fighters suddenly changed course, their pilots screaming over the communications that they had lost control of their own ships. The fighters began performing maneuvers that should have been impossible, turning at angles that would have liquefied any organic crew, accelerating beyond their structural limits without breaking apart. How are they doing this? He demanded. Doctor. Webb, monitoring the battle from Earth's command center, smiled grimly as he watched the alien fighters dance helplessly in space. Quantum entanglement field manipulation, he explained to Director Chen. We've been seeding their ships with quantum-paired particles every time they've sent scouts through our system for the past 50 years. Now we can override their control systems at the subatomic level. Admiral Martinez's voice cut through the hegemony communications again. Admiral Kextar, as you can see, your fighters are no longer under your command. They are, however, completely unharmed. Their pilots are alive and well, just passengers for the moment. Withdraw now, and we will return control of their vessels. But Kextar's pride would not allow retreat. All ships, launch full assault. overwhelmed their defenses. What followed was unlike any battle in recorded galactic history. The Hegemony fleet unleashed enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. Plasma beams, antimatter torpedoes, and gravitational disruptors filled the void between Earth and its moon with deadly energy. Any normal planet would have been reduced to cosmic dust within minutes. Instead, Earth seemed to shimmer. "Impossible," gasped Science Officer Klendar. "The energy weapons, they're being redirected." Around Earth, massive installations rose from the ocean floors, structures that had been hidden for decades, disguised as underwater mountains and coral reefs. These installations projected fields that bent space-time itself, creating corridors, through which the Hegemony's own weapons were funneled harmlessly into the void. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Fleet Admiral Rixal reported, his voice barely a whisper. "Our weapons are coming back. Every plasma beam, every torpedo, every directed energy weapon the fleet had fired was returning to sender." The installations around Earth weren't just redirecting the attacks, they were sending them back along their original trajectories with surgical precision. The divine retribution, a massive dreadnought that had led the assault, suddenly found itself bombarded by its own weapons, its shields held but barely. "Evasive maneuvers," Kextar ordered. "All ships scatter formation." But as the fleet tried to disperse, they discovered another impossibility. Space itself seemed to be resisting their movements. Their ships moved through what felt like thick honey, while Earth's own defensive platforms zipped around them with impossible agility. Admiral Martinez's voice returned. "Admiral, you're seeing approximately 3% of Earth's defensive capability. Stand down now, or we will be forced to demonstrate more." 3%? Kextar's mind reeled. If this was only 3% of their capability, what were these humans hiding? As the battle raged, something even more disturbing became apparent. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were learning. Every tactic the Hegemony employed was countered within minutes. Every new weapon configuration was immediately neutralized by adaptations in Earth's defense grid. "Sir," Intelligence Officer Zalek reported, his tentacles trembling, "I'm detecting something unprecedented. The humans aren't just reacting to our attacks, they're predicting them. Somehow, they know what we're going to do before we do it." The truth was even more remarkable than Zalek suspected. In quantum computers hidden beneath every major city on Earth, artificial intelligences were running millions of battle simulations per second, calculating every possible move the Hegemony fleet could make and preparing counters for each one. But the real surprise was yet to come. "Fleet Admiral," Communications Officer Rixal announced, "we're receiving a transmission on a frequency we've never encountered. It's from inside our own fleet." "What do you mean, inside our fleet?" "The signal is originating from the Eternal Conquest, sir, but that's impossible. Captain Morden would never—" The main display flickered, revealing the bridge of another Hegemony vessel, but instead of Captain Morden, a human figure sat in the command chair, a tall man with graying hair and the bearing of a seasoned military officer. "Hello, Admiral Kextar," the human said in perfect Hegemony standard. "I'm Admiral Thomas Richardson, formerly of the Earth Defense Forces, currently serving as captain of your vessel, the Eternal Conquest." Kextar's 4 eyes widened in shock. How is this possible?" "Transporter technology," Richardson replied casually. "We've been studying your ships for decades. Every scout vessel you've sent through our system gave us more information about your technology, your tactics, your weaknesses. When your fleet arrived, we were ready." The implications hit Kextar like a physical blow. "You've been preparing for this invasion for decades. Admiral, humanity has known about the Hegemony for over 200 years. We've been watching you expand across the galaxy, conquering world after world. We knew our turn would come eventually." As more reports came in, the scope of humanity's preparation became clear. Nearly a third of the Hegemony fleet was now under human control, their crews safely transported to holding facilities on Earth, while human officers took command of their vessels. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. "Admiral Kextar," came a new voice over the communication system. This one was older, carrying an authority that made even the fleet admiral straighten in his chair. "This is Secretary General Amanda Foster of the United Earth Government." What? Do you want human? Kextar snarled. To tell you the truth about your empire, Admiral, you see, humanity has a unique gift among galactic civilizations. We learn, not just from our own mistakes, but from observing others. We've been watching the hegemony for centuries, studying your conquests, analyzing your methods. The display changed, showing a galactic map marked with thousands of stars. Do you know how many civilizations the hegemony has conquered in the past millennium, Admiral? Over 8,000 worlds have been brought into the Empire. Kextar replied automatically. And do you know how many of those worlds are still inhabited by their original species? Kextar remained silent. The answer was classified at the highest levels, but he knew it. Less than 12%. We know about the culling programs, Admiral. We know about the resource optimization protocols. We know that conquest is just the first step in genocide. The human continued. Every species you've conquered, every world you've sterilized, every civilization you've erased from existence, we've been keeping records, names, cultures, technologies, art, music, literature, everything your empire tried to erase forever. Admiral Foster's image appeared on screen, an elderly human woman with silver hair and eyes that held depths of sadness and determination. We are the galaxy's memory, Admiral, and we will not forget. As if summoned by her words, space around the hegemony fleet began to shimmer. New vessels appeared, not human ships, but craft of designs Kextar had never seen. Sleek ships that moved like living things, geometric vessels that seemed to exist. In more than 3 dimensions, organic-looking craft that pulsed with their own inner light. Admiral, Velnara whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror. Those ships, they match some of our oldest records, civilizations we thought were extinct. Secretary General Foster's smile was sad but determined. Extinct? No, Admiral, hidden, protected, waiting for the right moment to return. The truth crashed over Kextar like a tsunami. Humanity hadn't just been preparing to defend Earth. They had been gathering the survivors of every civilization the hegemony had tried to destroy, giving them sanctuary, helping them rebuild, waiting for the moment when they could strike back. For 200 years, Foster continued, Earth has been a refuge for your empire's victims. We've learned from each species, combined technologies, shared knowledge. What you're facing now isn't just human ingenuity, it's the collected wisdom and determination of every race you've ever wronged. The once mighty hegemony fleet found itself surrounded by vessels from across the galaxy. Ships belonging to the Veltar Collective, thought destroyed 3 centuries ago, craft of the Crystal Builders, whose worlds had been strip-mined for resources. Vessels of the Singing Forests, whose planet-spanning organisms had been reduced to biological fuel, all of them alive, all of them very, very angry. You have a choice, Admiral, Foster said. Surrender your fleet, submit to justice for your empire's crimes, and we will spare the lives of your crews. Continue to resist, and face the combined wrath of every civilization you've tried to exterminate. Kextar looked around his bridge at officers who had never known defeat, now facing an enemy they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, couldn't overcome. The tactical display showed the true scope of the trap they had flown into. Earth wasn't just defended, it was the center of a galactic resistance network that had been preparing for this moment for centuries. How? He asked finally. How did we miss this? Our intelligence network spanned the galaxy. Admiral, came a familiar voice, his own intelligence officer Zalek. But something was wrong with the tone, with the inflection. The intelligence networks you trusted were not entirely accurate. Kextar spun to face his most trusted advisor, seeing him with new eyes. The subtle differences in behavior, the occasional odd phrase, the questions that seemed designed to probe hegemony capabilities rather than analyze threats. You, he whispered, you've been feeding them information. For 37 years, Zalek replied calmly. Long enough to see 17 worlds reduced to ash, long enough to watch my own species scattered to the winds. Did you know that Veltaran, children were considered delicacies among the hegemony elite? Did you know they kept some alive specifically for that purpose? The bridge fell silent. Kextar's world, everything he had believed about his empire, his purpose, his noble mission, to bring order to chaos, crumbled around him. Over the next several hours, the scope of Earth's preparation became fully apparent. The network of hidden civilizations wasn't limited to a few survivors. Entire species had been relocated to hidden worlds, their populations rebuilt, their technologies preserved and enhanced. The Hegemony's own records had been systematically altered over decades to hide the extent of the resistance. More shocking still, the infiltration went far beyond intelligence networks. Key positions throughout the Hegemony hierarchy had been filled with agents working for the Earth Alliance. Military commanders, government officials, even members of the High Council itself had been feeding information to the resistance for generations. The vote to send your fleet to Earth wasn't unanimous, Secretary General Foster explained, as surrender negotiations began. In fact, it was 7-5 against the invasion. The deciding votes came from council members who have been working with us for over a century. Admiral Kextar, now a prisoner aboard his own flagship with his crew safely detained on Earth, struggled to process the magnitude of the deception. You manipulated our government into sending the fleet here. This was all a trap. A trap. Yes, but not just for your fleet, Admiral, for your empire. Foster gestured to a holographic display showing Hegemony space. Across hundreds of worlds, simultaneously, Hegemony garrisons were being overwhelmed by coordinated uprisings. Species thought extinct emerged from hidden bases, armed with technologies the Empire couldn't counter. Entire sectors were declaring independence, backed by fleets that had been secretly assembled over decades. While your attention was focused on conquering Earth, Foster explained, the galaxy was taking back its freedom. Of the 9,900 ships that had arrived to conquer Earth, only 847 would eventually return to Hegemony space. The rest were either captured, their crews detained pending war crimes tribunals, or had voluntarily defected to the Earth Alliance once. They learned the truth about their empire's atrocities. Admiral Kextar himself faced a choice that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. Secretary General Foster sat across from him in a comfortable conference room deep within Earth's command complex, offering him tea from a delicate porcelain cup. "Your empire is finished, Admiral," she said gently. "Not destroyed. We're not. Like you, but transformed. The galactic community won't tolerate genocide anymore. The age of conquest is over." Kextar stared into his cup, seeing his reflection in the amber liquid. "What happens to my people, the ones who didn't participate in the atrocities? They'll be integrated into the new galactic community, just like everyone else. There will be reparations to pay, damaged worlds to rebuild, species to relocate back to their homelands. It will take generations, but your people will survive. And those responsible for the cullings," Foster's expression hardened slightly. "Justice, Admiral, real justice. Not revenge, but accountability. Every victim will be remembered. Every crime will be answered for." Kextar set down his cup and looked at the human woman across from him. "Why? After everything my people did, why show mercy?" Foster smiled, and for the first time Kextar saw something in her eyes that he was only beginning to understand. Hope. "Because, Admiral, that's what separates us from you. We believe that even the worst among us can choose to be better. Your empire conquered through fear and force. We're going to heal the galaxy through forgiveness and justice." 6 months later, former Fleet Admiral Kextar stood on the observation deck of the Earth Alliance vessel New Dawn, watching as construction crews worked to repair a devastated world in what had once been Hegemony space. The planet's original inhabitants, a species of crystalline beings thought extinct for 4 centuries, had returned to reclaim their ancestral home. "Remarkable, isn't it?" said Admiral Richardson, the human who had taken command of Kextar's ship during the battle. He now served as Kextar's liaison and, somewhat surprisingly, had become something like a friend. "I still don't understand," Kextar admitted. "We came to conquer your world. We would have enslaved or killed every human on Earth. Why help us rebuild?" Richardson was quiet for a moment, watching as Hegemony engineers worked alongside former slaves to construct new cities. "You know what the most human thing is, Admiral. It's not our technology, or our adaptability, or even our stubbornness. It's our ability to imagine a better future, and work to make it real even when everything seems hopeless. He pointed to the planet below, where crystal spires were beginning to rise from the ruins of military installations. Those beings down, they spent 4 centuries hiding in asteroid belts and rogue planets, keeping their culture alive through oral traditions and hope. They never stopped believing they would come home someday. Kextar nodded slowly. In the months since his capture, he had learned more about the galaxy's true history than his empire's propaganda had ever taught him. The scope of the hegemony's crimes was staggering, but so was the resilience of the species that had survived. "What will you do now?" Richardson asked. Kextar considered the question. The new Galactic Council had offered him a position helping to coordinate the massive refugee resettlement programs. It was a chance to spend the rest of his life trying to repair some of the damage his empire had caused. "I think," he said finally, "I'd like to learn what it means to build instead of destroy." In the years that followed, the story of humanity's impossible victory spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The species that had seemed primitive and defenseless had not only defeated the greatest military force in known history, but had done so without becoming monsters themselves. The tale took on mythic proportions in some sectors. Humans were portrayed as perfect beings, incapable of evil or error. But those who knew them better understood a different truth, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tactics, but their choice to remain human, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. On a remote trading station, in what had once been hegemony space, a young Veltaran listener gathered with beings from a dozen different species to hear an old storyteller recite the tale of Earth's defense. "They sent 9,900 ships to conquer Earth," the storyteller began, her voice carrying across the crowded tavern. "The greatest invasion fleet in galactic history, armed with weapons that could crack planets and commanded by officers who had never known defeat." The crowd leaned in, even though many had heard this story dozens of times before. But the humans were waiting, and when the smoke cleared and the last surrender was signed, only a few of those 9,900 ships returned to tell the tale of how a single world changed the course of galactic history. A hush fell over the tavern as beings contemplated the magnitude of that change. The galaxy was still healing, still learning how to build rather than conquer, still struggling to overcome the legacy of millennia of warfare and oppression. But it was healing. And in large part, that was because of a small blue planet whose inhabitants had refused to let hatred corrupt their hearts, even when they had every reason to embrace it. The storyteller raised her cup in a toast that had become traditional throughout. "Free space. To the humans of Earth, who showed us that the strongest weapon in the universe isn't a plasma cannon or an antimatter bomb. It's the choice to be better than those who would destroy us." Across the tavern, cups were raised, and voices joined in the response that sealed the toast. "May we all learn to be so strong." And somewhere in the depths of space, monitoring stations that had once tracked invasion fleets now watched over refugee convoys carrying the displaced home, ensuring that the galaxy's long journey toward peace would continue uninterrupted. The age of conquest was over. The age of rebuilding had begun. And it had all started with 9,900 ships that came to conquer a world, and learned instead what it meant to be conquered by mercy.